This story is true, and for the safety of those involved, I'll change the names of the characters, but I'll be as true as possible to the original story. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and comment here if you would have the courage. Claire was 23 years old and carried in her eyes a restless sparkle, a hunger for discovery that grew with her since the time she ran barefoot through the fields of her grandfather's ranch. Her body was slender, shaped by work in the fields and years of horseback riding under the relentless Texas sun. Her firm legs, curvy hips, and sun-kissed skin told the story of a country girl, strong and fearless. But there was something more to her now, something that the years in the city had awakened. When she left the ranch to study in college, Claire dove into an ocean of possibilities. She met different people, tasted new flavors, and felt desires she didn't even know how to name before. The world outside was vibrant, pulsating, full of promise. But despite all this novelty, she never fully detached from her roots. She was dating a city boy, but always returned to the ranch to visit her parents and grandparents, smelling the earth, the sound of the wind cutting through the fields, the warm touch of the sun on her skin. The ranch, with its spacious porches and the creaking of the wooden windows, held intense memories. Mornings started early, with the smell of coffee and the sound of chickens in the yard. The nights were silent, but full of secrets. Since she was a child, Claire noticed furtive glances between the adults, conversations cut short, tensions that hung in the air like electricity about to be released. She didn't understand everything back then, but she felt it. And that feeling never left her. Now, back in the house where she grew up, something felt different. Maybe it was she herself who had changed. Or maybe those secrets, which always floated around like shadows, were about to be revealed. But the first spark of this discovery would come from an unexpected place. Hidden in yellowed pages, lost among old books, where words whispered promises that her restless mind was ready to decipher. Claire always had a fascination with stories. Since she was little, she spent hours browsing her grandmother's books, absorbing every word, every narrative about impossible loves and intertwined destinies. But it was in her teenage years that her curiosity took a new direction. Among the old books in her grandfather's office, she found something different. Worn pages, filled with words that sent shivers down her spine and quickened her breath. At first, she didn't fully understand what she was reading, but she felt it. The heat rising up her neck, the blush in her cheeks, the restless desire to know more. Those tales described intense feelings, intertwined bodies, moments charged with tension and forbidden secrets. And in the silence of the night, when the ranch plunged into darkness, Claire reread each line, slowly absorbing the hidden meanings behind the words. Over time, she realized that it wasn't just the reading that affected her, but the feeling that there was something familiar there. Small details in the stories echoed the things she had already felt on the ranch. The glances exchanged between the adults, the smiles full of subtext, the way some conversations died in the middle, as if they were hiding something that shouldn't be said. That awakened a restlessness in her, a desire to understand what was really going on around her. Now, at 23, with the experience of the city in her baggage, Claire realized how much those stories had shaped her view of desire and relationships. But she also felt that, perhaps, she was about to discover that reality could be even more intense than any written story. In the city, Claire discovered the game of seduction, but also realized that it didn't always end like in the stories she read. Ryan had been her boyfriend for over a year, a confident and energetic guy who loved going out, trying new things, and living in the moment without worrying about tomorrow. At first, this fascinated her. The nights together, the stolen kisses in the college hallways, his hands exploring her body in the car seat after parties, everything seemed exciting. But with each encounter, every time he pulled her into a darker corner with urgency in his eyes, something in her remained incomplete. Ryan knew how to tease her, but he never seemed to know how to satisfy her. His touches were rushed, as if they were always racing against time, as if her pleasure was just a detail in the midst of his haste. Claire tried to surrender, tried to find in those moments the intensity she so desired, but she could never get there. While her friends talked about nights of pure ecstasy, about tremors that left them breathless, Claire listened in silence, forcing a smile. She knew what desire was. She had felt it before, but not with Ryan. There were nights when, lying next to him, her mind wandered to other places, other stories. She thought about the pages she read in secret as a teenager, about how certain characters made desire seem like an uncontrollable force, something that transcended the body and burned from within. With Ryan, it wasn't like that. He was handsome, he had game, but he didn't know how to lead a dance that Claire so wanted to learn. And that frustrated her, even though she never had the courage to say it out loud. Now, back at the ranch, Claire wondered if the problem was with her or if she simply had never found someone who knew how to touch her skin the right way. It was Thanksgiving, and Claire's family decided to gather at her grandparents' ranch. Anxious to escape the city routine, she decided to take Ryan with her, the boyfriend with whom, in recent weeks, the relationship had become more intense, or at least in the moments when he wasn't teasing her in public. She drove the car she got from her stepfather Jake when she turned 18, and even now, in her 20s, she couldn't help but feel a little more confident and daring every time she sat in the driver's seat of that relic. As soon as they arrived, Ryan had a mischievous smile on his face, always with that look that knew how to provoke Claire with a simple movement. She tried to ignore it, but when he whispered words that only they understood, the tension between them intensified. The public teasing was getting more and more frequent, and Claire knew that soon he would find a way to seduce her somewhere isolated. That's when he pulled her, smirking, towards the ranch barn. There, among the shadows and the smell of hay, Claire and Ryan surrendered to the fire of passion. His body touching her with familiarity, she lost herself in his touch, their lips meeting with an urgency that made her heart race. It was like a game between them, a forbidden dance that happened whenever they were away from prying eyes. But in that moment, the air felt heavy, like something was wrong, and it didn't take long for Claire to feel it too. In the heat of the moment, as Ryan kissed her passionately, a familiar sound cut through the air, a deep cough, which Claire immediately recognized. Her heart skipped a beat, and a strange feeling ran through her body. It was Jake, her stepfather. The cough, low and muffled, came from a corner of the barn entrance. They quickly pulled apart, adjusting their clothes and trying to control their breathing. The tension in the air was thick as they looked at each other, hoping Jake hadn't seen anything, that it was just a random cough. But something inside Claire told her it wasn't just a cough. The feeling that Jake knew more than he should hung in the air, and she couldn't ignore it. The silence between them seemed to stretch on, and Claire didn't know if she could keep pretending that everything was okay. The pool was full of laughter and fun, but Claire couldn't focus on the fun. Her body was tense, her thoughts racing. Ever since she and Ryan hid in the barn, something seemed to be off. Jake's gaze, her stepfather's, seemed always focused on her. He watched her from afar, with an intensity that made her heart race. Claire felt nervous, thinking he might know what happened there. Maybe he saw something, or maybe it was just her imagination. But the feeling of unease was undeniable. When the game started, women against men, Claire tried to distract herself, jumping in the water and trying to focus on the competition. But, as she moved around, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was always nearby. Suddenly, without realizing it, she felt him behind her. The warmth of his body and his large bulge pressing against her under the water was like an electric shock that ran down her spine, and, for a second, Claire froze. Her breathing got heavier, and, unintentionally, her eyes searched for his body, noticing the difference in the size of his swim trunks, something much more visible and imposing than Ryan's. It was an unavoidable comparison, but, in that moment, so intense that she couldn't look away, Claire stopped thinking about what was right. She just followed what her body was telling her to do. And with each movement, she found herself closer to him. It was as if, unintentionally, her attraction was pulling her closer and closer to him. Every light touch, every movement he made towards the water, made Claire move closer, seeking to feel that tension again. She didn't know if it was the heat of the water or the heat of his body, but she felt a whirlwind of emotions forming inside her. It was as if she could no longer avoid what was happening. She was looking, without realizing it, for an excuse to be closer, to feel the strength of his presence again. The game went on, but for Claire, nothing else mattered. Her body was on autopilot, her steps taking her closer to him, almost as if she wanted him without admitting it. Every movement she made, no matter how small, seemed to draw her body even closer to Jake. And the closer she got, the faster her heart beat, and the more the comparison with Ryan became clear in her mind. It was impossible not to notice the difference. But above all, Claire could no longer control what she felt. After the game ended, the family started saying goodbye and heading home. Claire, still confused, approached her mother, softly asking if she was going home. Her mother, with a relaxed smile, replied that she would stay at Grandma's house, and that Jake would pick her up the next day. Claire nodded, feeling a pang of anxiety in her chest, but trying to hide it. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more tense at the idea of staying there, under Jake's gaze. She then picked up her boyfriend and drove him home. On the way, he started teasing her, with little jokes and touches that annoyed her more than excited her. Claire, however, was completely distracted, her thoughts far away. Her boyfriend's touch didn't affect her the same way. In fact, she even pretended to give in, trying to seem involved, but her mind was distant, focused on Jake, on the heat she felt when she got close to him at the pool, on the looks they exchanged, on the conflicting feelings that consumed her. When she finally arrived at his house, Claire dropped her boyfriend off with a quick kiss and went to her mom's house, going upstairs to her room. The quietness of the house seemed heavier than ever. She closed the door behind her, feeling the loneliness of the room. She went straight to the bathroom, turning on the shower and letting the warm water soothe her, but she couldn't push the thoughts away. With every drop that fell on her skin, her mind filled with images of what happened at the pool with Jake's gaze, the almost imperceptible touch she had felt. After her shower, Claire sat on the edge of the bed and, without much thought, picked up her nightgown from when she still lived there. It was short and tight, making the fabric see-through. But since she was going to sleep and was feeling flushed, she didn't know if it was from her thoughts or the weather. She decided not to wear any underwear. The feeling of soft fabric on her skin wasn't enough to completely calm her down. She was aware of the whirlwind of feelings inside her, of the emotions that were about to explode. All she wanted was to disappear right there, but she knew things were about to get even more intense. She didn't know what to expect, but she was sure of one thing. Her mind wouldn't leave her alone anytime soon. Lying in bed, feeling the fabric of her nightgown slide softly over her body, the desire only grew. That's when her stepfather entered the room. Startled, she quickly threw the sheet over herself, embarrassed. Claire, trying to break the tension, just said, "I didn't see you come in."
After a while of silence, Claire's stepfather watched her more closely, almost as if he were trying to understand what she wasn't saying. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice calm, but filled with a curiosity she couldn't ignore. "I noticed you were different today, Claire," he said, choosing his words carefully, as if he wanted to be careful but still address what had happened in the barn. "Was there something that made you uncomfortable? You seemed distant, like something was bothering you." Claire felt a chill down her spine, and for a moment her words were lost. She didn't know what to say. What did he really want to know? She tried to divert, keeping the conversation focused, but the tension in the air was clear. He didn't seem to want to make accusations, but the way he approached and the way his words were delivered indicated that he knew. She felt nervous, trying to hide it, but his concern was clear. But Claire didn't know what to say. Claire tried to cover it up. "What exactly are you talking about?" Jake smiles and says, "The barn. I saw you two. He was devouring you, and I saw you caressing Ryan's glove. You were about to do it right there." Claire, all red without reaction. She just lowered her head without saying anything, and Jake says, "But you know what impressed me the most?" Claire, with a low voice, looks at her stepfather's face and just says, "No." He, with a mischievous smile, says, "Seeing your beautiful melons out while you were kissing." Claire was shocked. "Jake, what is this?" He answers, "Do you think I didn't notice you in the pool looking for me? And when I leaned against your trunk with my cane, you almost went crazy." Claire couldn't hide anymore and just let the sheet go down, and with the headlights pointing at her transparent nightgown says, "The ones you were talking about?" Jake, with one hand, just pulled Claire close to him. Her nightgown with nothing underneath went up in the pull, and Jake deliberately threw it on with loose shorts and no underwear. When she leaned against him, she felt the gigantic pole touching her little cave, even though it was still over her shorts. It was very big. While she kissed him, Jake said, "Caress me now like you did with your boyfriend, my little slut." Everything he said, the way he touched, every time she felt Jake's pole on her body and her hands, drove her crazy. Everything was good. The forbidden, the betrayal, everything made her feel like when she was little and read those stories. Claire was treated like a little slut. And when the pole finally entered her cave, which was like a waterfall, Claire didn't hide anything anymore. She took advantage of the fact that they were alone in the house and screamed like never before. There were 3 in a row. The last, Claire asked him to put it at the back door. It was the climax. Her boyfriend Ryan didn't like it, and they even tried. But when it came time to conclude Ryan didn't, I couldn't. So Jake put the whole piece inside. Jake said, "Claire, I didn't know you had such potential," and started a frantic movement until they both went crazy. If you like this type of story, leave a comment to help the channel, subscribe and like, enjoy and watch our latest video about the gifted cousin.